Lando Norris is furious with Oscar Piastri after the Italian Grand Prix, and Zak Brown couldn't be happier. He's making his McLaren boys race under papaya rules, which seems to heighten the intra-team competition. What is it, and who does it pose a threat to? The answers lie right here. Lando Norris was left furious after the race, as he was just 1 metre away from a collision with his teammate after Oscar Piastri executed a daring overtake at Monza. The Australian driver lunged down the inside of Norris at turn 4, seizing the race lead and ultimately staying ahead of his McLaren teammate, although he didn't secure the victory. While Charles Leclerc impressed with a masterful one-stop strategy, it was Piastri who showcased blistering speed, finishing second ahead of Norris, who had started from pole. But Norris expressed some frustration over his teammate's aggressive move, admitting he was caught off guard and suggesting that if he had braked even a millimetre later, the two McLarens could have collided. When asked if he was taken aback by Piastri's move, Norris said, "A little bit. Obviously, I would have just braked a bit later if I needed to. We had a big gap behind, and between us two cars, there's no risk. I feel like he got way too close for comfort. We both easily could have been out in that corner if I braked 1 metre later. Obviously, if I could rewind, I would do stuff slightly differently, but it is what it is. Oscar drove a good race, and so did Charles. Ferrari just drove a better race today, especially Charles. He did a very good job. So just hats off to him." When it comes to what he'd do differently in a similar situation, Norris was just as direct in his response. But he emphasised that braking later for the corner isn't as simple as it might seem. "Just brake a bit later, simple as that," Norris said. "But sometimes it's easier said than done. I'd obviously braked on the limit, and he gave me space. It was just about enough. I did my best to avoid anything else happening at the time. But if I brake 2 metres later, you don't know, and you can't predict 2 metres later, and it could easily have been a crash. So it's a tough one. The easiest thing is just to brake way later and force him off and kind of treat it like no one else. But yeah, I don't know. I obviously took it easy. I saw we had a massive gap behind, so maybe it was just a bit too much on the cautious side and paid the price." When asked whether McLaren might have secured a 1-2 finish if the incident at the second chicane hadn't occurred, an incident that allowed Leclerc to slip through, Norris responded, "No, because, maybe. Charles won by 2 seconds in the end. The fact he got ahead probably gained him 2 seconds over the course of the race, so maybe, I don't know. Charles just drove a good race. They did something with strategy that we would not be able to achieve today. From rear, we're very strong. I think that's why we've been so good at other races. But today was not a question of rear degradation. It was front degradation. And we struggled just too much, and clearly Charles and Ferrari were better than us today from that perspective, and that won them the race. But we were ready for that. I think we kind of expected someone else to be very good on tyres, and it turned out to be the Ferraris. So yeah, if there's anyone I'd rather win, it's the Ferrari around Monza, so good job to them." The team radio instructions were clear. The McLaren drivers were free to race under what were referred to as papaya rules, a term team principal Andrea Stella mentioned after qualifying. When asked to clarify the meaning of papaya rules, Lando Norris kept it simple and to the point. "Just don't crash. That's all. There was no contact, so he did a good job." And as for pulling off a one-stop of their own, Norris said it wasn't in the cards for them. He added, "We considered it the whole race, but it was not possible with the amount of graining that I had. We knew it would be tight, but just with our car and some of the limitations we have, it wasn't possible today." Despite missing out on the victory to Ferrari, McLaren's strong performance has allowed them to narrow the gap to Red Bull in the constructors' standings, leaving the Milton Keynes team just 8 points ahead. When asked whether McLaren might be playing it too safe in their ongoing championship battle, Norris took a moment to reflect on their approach. Then he said, "Hindsight's a wonderful thing. We always review things. We're doing a very good job. Of course, today was not our day and we didn't get things correct, but I wouldn't say we got them wrong today either. I certainly couldn't have done a one-stop. Being the second car is always a lot tougher than being the first car, which is a fair thing, that's racing. But to try and keep up with Oscar in the dirty air means I had to use a lot more tyre, and using a lot more tyre made me box earlier, so that's just the price I paid for not being in the clean air. But we both clearly suffered a lot more than the Ferrari, and not a lot we could do at the time. If we could go back and review things and change some things, maybe we could prepare even more for it, but we knew our limitations, we knew what to expect. I feel like we still maximised today, we just didn't quite have what Ferrari had. Oscar Piastri believes his first lap overtake on Lando Norris set him up in a race-winning position for much of the Italian Grand Prix, only to see Ferrari's strategy steal the spotlight. The Australian expressed his disappointment at missing out on what could have been his second victory of the season, as Ferrari's clever switch to a one-stop strategy for Charles Leclerc outmanoeuvred both McLaren drivers, who made 2 pit stops. Looking back on his first lap move, Piastri saw it as a strong and decisive manoeuvre that put him in contention early on. He told the media after the race, I broke later and got around the outside. There wasn't really much more to it than that. We both got through unscathed, and I knew once I hit the brakes, I kind of got ahead a bit, and I knew I was kind of entitled to stay on the outside. Ultimately, for 38 laps of that race, it put me in a race-winning position. So for me, it was just a good first lap. Piastri also admitted it hurt, not being able to catch Leclerc in the closing stages of the race. "It hurts, I'm not going to lie. It hurts a lot," the Australian said. "Did a lot of things right today. There were a lot of question marks on the strategy going into the race from the position we were in. With the tyres looking like they did, doing a one-stop seemed like a very risky goal, and it was right." And when it was his turn to be asked if a one-stop strategy was for him, he said, "In hindsight, yes. But everyone's a legend on Monday after the race. And today, unfortunately, we got it a bit wrong. We had everything to lose from being in the lead of the race. Charles could try something a bit different. The mediums were getting destroyed, and even the hards on the Red Bull at the start looked pretty dead, and my front left was pretty heavily grained. Just, we didn't expect it to clear back up again, which it did. What do you think? Was Oscar Piastri too ambitious with his lap 1 move, or is Lando Norris being a sore loser about having pole position taken from him? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell for the hottest F1 news.